You've been told your whole life that you're being tested, that every setback, every heartbreak, every storm is the universe checking your strength, your character, your faith. As if existence were some celestial school and you were being graded by a distant, invisible examiner. But what if that narrative is obsolete? What if the events you've labeled as tests were never about proving anything, but were actually opportunities for energetic reconfiguration, points in time where your reality is not assessing you, but waiting for a new signal? This isn't spiritual metaphor. This is mechanics. Energetic mechanics. Consciousness mechanics. Quantum mechanics. This channel doesn't do surface-level positivity. We're not here to recycle pop spirituality or spiritual bypassing. We explore the frontier, where consciousness collides with systems theory, quantum probability, and energetic architecture. And today, we're going to reframe one of the most deeply embedded myths in the personal development world: the belief that you're being tested. This idea is so culturally entrenched that it's rarely questioned. When something falls apart, the knee-jerk reaction is, this is a test, a trial, a challenge sent to see how much you can endure. But here's the shift. You're not being tested. You're being transformed. Every difficult situation you encounter isn't a judgment on your capability. It's a reflection of where your current energetic patterns are no longer sustainable. They are points of divergence, where the reality you've been living can no longer support the signal you're trying to broadcast. And so it breaks, fails, crumbles, not to punish, not to humble, but to restructure. In quantum terms, we're talking about resonance collapse and timeline friction. You are not on a linear journey towards some endpoint where you finally pass the exam. You are participating in a complex, dynamic dance with probabilistic fields, interacting constantly with parallel outcomes, all waiting for resonance clarity. Let's take this deeper. In a traditional worldview, struggle implies punishment or lesson. There's a divine hierarchy and you're at the mercy of it. You must earn your next phase. But in a quantum worldview, outcomes are probabilistic, not moralistic. There's no divine grading rubric. There's only frequency alignment. That means when things start going wrong, it's not because you're being punished or evaluated. It's because your current signal no longer matches the timeline you're standing on. Think of reality like a network of vibrational corridors. Each one represents a slightly different version of your life. Some are healthier, some are more chaotic, some carry breakthroughs, others repeat loops. You're not rewarded for being good. You're not punished for being bad. You simply resonate into a new corridor based on the coherence of your identity and energetic field. Now let's zoom in. Let's say you're pushing toward a new version of yourself, a healthier identity, a more aligned business, a deeper connection to purpose. But your system is still running old code. Emotional algorithms shaped by scarcity, unprocessed trauma, false narratives about your limitations. What happens? You hit what we call an impedance threshold. Reality doesn't flow. It distorts. Events start to glitch. Opportunities close. People exit. Things fall apart. And most people interpret this moment as a test. They think they're being evaluated. Do I deserve this upgrade? Is the universe seeing whether I'm ready? But the real story is entirely different. You're at a quantum junction. The system is destabilizing not to test you, but to clear space for a new configuration. This is what we call a transmutation point. It's a destabilized region in the energetic field where your old identity can no longer sustain its illusion of permanence. So everything starts to break apart, not to test your resilience, but to clear the energetic cache. Now here's the most important part. You can't access a new timeline with the same signal that created the old one. This is where transformation replaces testing. Because transformation isn't about earning a reward, it's about shifting frequency to align with a different probability stream. It's not a test to see if you can handle pressure. It's a recalibration so your signal can match an entirely new set of outcomes. And when that shift occurs, when your identity field collapses old algorithms and establishes coherence with a higher potential, that's not passing a test. That's collapsing one waveform and selecting another. This is the radical truth most manifestation philosophies never touch. You don't get what you want because you've proven you're worthy. You get what aligns with the precision of your signal. Now, this might feel confronting, because it strips away the comforting mythology that if you just work hard enough or stay positive, you'll earn your breakthrough. But this shift in worldview is powerful, because it puts your focus not on appeasing some cosmic evaluator, but on mastering your own resonance mechanics. That's why we're here, to explore the true science and philosophy behind your transformation. Not in symbolic terms, but in energetic and systemic precision. Today, we begin by exploring the foundational flaw in the idea of tests. We'll expose how this belief is rooted in scarcity and hierarchy, and how that story limits your ability to shift timelines. Then we'll trace how consciousness interacts with the quantum field, how probabilities resolve, and why your job is not to survive a test, but to refine your signal. So get ready, because the story of your life is not being written by tests. It's being rewritten by transformation, and you are the signal caller of every outcome that stabilizes in your field. For generations, the idea of life being a series of tests has been reinforced in almost every culture, philosophy, and belief system. It's become a default lens. If something hard happens, it must be a test. But this view fundamentally misrepresents the mechanics of how reality functions, especially when viewed through the lens of frequency, coherence, and probabilistic alignment. The test narrative is built on an assumption that something outside of you is judging, measuring, and deciding your worthiness. It assumes a hierarchy between you and the outcomes you seek, and it implies that until you've earned your next level, it's withheld from you. This creates a dynamic of striving, of pleasing the universe, of enduring pain as proof of readiness. But here's the reframe: the universe is not asking you to pass. It's asking you to resonate. That means there's no scorecard, no exam, only signal. In physics, resonance occurs when an object vibrates at the same natural frequency as another. The result is amplification, coherence, alignment. There's no judgment involved. Just match and amplify. So when life appears to challenge you, what's actually happening is that your internal signal is either amplifying a timeline or distorting it. And the distortion feels like a test only because the energy in your field is mismatched to the outcome you're attempting to stabilize. Let's bring this into practical focus. When you say you want to change your financial reality, or heal a relationship, or expand your impact, but your underlying belief structure is still shaped by shame, scarcity, or past limitation, you experience disruption, friction, feedback, and because you've been taught to interpret friction as punishment, you label it as a test. But there is no judge. There is only data. The friction isn't a trial. It's a resonance mismatch. Think of your consciousness as a tuner. Every thought, emotion, and belief is part of the waveform you emit into the field. The field doesn't decide whether you're worthy of receiving. It simply returns patterns that match your dominant broadcast. That's the secret most miss. The universe isn't personal. It's precise. You don't get what you want. You get what you broadcast with coherence. When you attempt to override a misaligned broadcast with forced action or toxic positivity, you're not resolving the field, you're amplifying distortion. This is why so many people feel stuck in loops. They believe they're being tested again because they didn't learn the lesson. But in reality, their signal never changed. So the same outcome repeats. Let's get more technical. In quantum mechanics, the behavior of subatomic particles doesn't resolve until it's observed. Until then, it exists as a cloud of probability, a superposition. It's not until a particular observation or interaction occurs that the probability collapses into a single reality. You're that observer. And your consciousness isn't just watching reality, it's shaping which probability resolves. Not by wishful thinking, but by field interaction. Your beliefs, your nervous system, your emotional patterns. These act as filters through which the probability field responds. And when those filters are incoherent, split between desire and doubt, you emit a fractured signal. And what does the field do? It resolves the pattern that matches the dominant signal, not the loudest wish. This is why effort alone doesn't produce transformation. You can work harder than anyone, but if your identity is still tuned to lack or fear, the signal you emit reinforces more of the same. Now let's apply this to the test narrative. When people face repeated challenges, Their default assumption is the universe must be testing me again. They double down. They suffer more. They grind harder. They search for the hidden lesson, all the while reinforcing a vibrational story that says, I am not enough until I pass. But that narrative is self-defeating, because if the universe is waiting for you to resonate, not pass, then every time you frame your situation as a test, you're reinforcing separation. You're reinforcing that you are being acted upon instead of recognizing you are co-creating in real time. This doesn't mean challenges disappear. In fact, when you're initiating a new frequency, your field may destabilize. Old patterns fall away. Attachments break. Emotions surface. This isn't the universe making you prove your worth. It's your energetic architecture recalibrating to house a new signal. This is transformation, not examination. And when you treat transformation as a test, you slow it down. You resist. You interpret growth as struggle. But when you understand that your only job is to create coherence between your desired outcome and your current broadcast, you move from being tested to being tuned. Now, this requires awareness. You have to become fluent in the mechanics of your own field. You have to track when your signal becomes distorted, when your emotions contract, when your language slips into lack, because all of these impact your resonance. The good news? Once you stabilize coherence, the field responds. Not someday, not when you've earned it, but instantly, because resonance doesn't wait for approval. It moves at the speed of alignment. So next time life disrupts your plans, ask yourself, is this a punishment? Or is this feedback? Is this a test? Or is this a signal misfire? Because you are not here to pass invisible exams. You are here to refine your energetic signature until your life becomes a mirror of your coherence. Next, we will explore what happens when your identity signal clashes with your desired timeline, and why resistance might not be holding you back, but trying to realign you. Resistance is often misunderstood. When you push toward a goal and reality seems to push back, the typical interpretation is, I'm blocked. Something's in my way. Maybe I'm not meant for this. Or worse, I must be failing some unseen test. But here's a critical truth. Resistance is rarely opposition. It's feedback. The sensation of resistance is not the universe closing doors. It's the result of energetic impedance, a phenomenon where your current identity field is not in phase with the energetic structure of the outcome you're moving toward. To understand this clearly, we need to break away from mystical interpretations and step into system dynamics. In systems thinking, every system has a structure. That includes you. Your thoughts, emotions, memories, beliefs, they don't float in the abstract. They form a structure, a stable pattern. That structure emits a signal, and that signal interacts with the reality field. Now, when you attempt to move into a new outcome, maybe a better career, a deeper relationship, a healthier body, you're essentially trying to shift into a new structural resonance. But here's the challenge. If your current system architecture is still coded with contradictory patterns, unresolved stories, incompatible beliefs, subconscious sabotage, then your field sends a mixed signal. And the quantum field doesn't ignore that. It reflects it back. This return signal is what you feel as resistance. But it's not punishment. It's not the universe saying no. It's your reality telling you, your signal is misaligned with your request. Let's illustrate this in simple energetic terms. Say you want to manifest a life of ease, but your nervous system is patterned by urgency, over-control, and overexertion. Your energetic imprint is tension. You say ease, but you broadcast strain. So the outcome stream associated with ease can't stabilize. It hits an impedance mismatch. That energetic friction doesn't block you. It reflects your current structure. The pushback you feel isn't a door slamming shut. It's an invitation to upgrade the integrity of your broadcast. Now let's take this deeper. Energetic impedance is not just a cool phrase. In physics, impedance is the resistance of a system to the flow of energy. When you introduce a signal into a medium, whether it's an electric circuit or an identity field, if the system's internal configuration isn't calibrated to receive that signal, it bounces back or gets distorted. Same in consciousness. When your identity structure, your beliefs, internal narratives, somatic patterns, is not tuned to receive what you're calling in. The system doesn't absorb the signal. It resists it. And again, this resistance isn't a barrier. It's the feedback loop of coherence demanding resolution. Now here's where most people misinterpret their experience. They feel friction, outcomes delay, doors close, emotions surge, and they default to the belief, I'm being blocked, or worse, I'm failing. But in truth, they're encountering the gap between their stated desire and their energetic capacity to hold it. The gap between what they say they want and what their system is currently coded to sustain. That gap is not a fault. It's not failure. It's an energetic readout. And when understood accurately, it becomes the most powerful calibration tool you possess. Let's unpack that calibration process. When you experience resistance, ask yourself, what outcome am I attempting to align with? What are the emotional, mental, and energetic signatures I currently emit? Are these coherent with the new identity required to stabilize that outcome? If they're not, then resistance isn't a problem. It's precision feedback. And that feedback allows you to locate the precise point of impedance and shift it. This is the transition from being reactive to being responsible, not in a moral sense, but in an energetic one. Responsibility, your ability to respond to feedback with signal adjustment. The quantum field is not blocking you. It's mirroring you. It doesn't deal in permission. It deals in precision. It doesn't test your worth. It reflects your waveform. And here's a game-changing truth. Outcomes do not belong to the most worthy. They belong to the most coherent. That's why someone who doesn't deserve something by traditional standards can still manifest it, because their signal structure matches the outcome field. And why someone who works hard, has good intentions, and does all the right things may still feel stuck, because their system is incoherent. It's broadcasting contradictory instructions into the field. Now let's link this to the illusion of struggle. The old model says, resistance means you're failing the test. Push harder. Endure more. Break through. But the new model says, resistance is data. It's showing you where the energetic structure of your self-concept must shift. It's not about doing more. It's about becoming resonant. So next time something pushes back, pause. Stop interpreting it as denial. Start seeing it as feedback. Track the signal. Refine the structure. Coherence will do the rest. Next, we will explore why your transformation process cannot be judged on success or failure, and how attempting to do so reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of phase transitions in consciousness. Failure only exists in a linear model. It assumes a beginning, a middle, and an end, like a race with a finish line. If you cross it, you win. If you don't, you lose. But quantum evolution doesn't work like that. Consciousness transformation doesn't work like that. And identity evolution definitely doesn't work like that. You aren't racing toward a goal. You're undergoing phase transitions. And in a phase transition, there is no failure, only entropy, collapse, and stabilization into a new configuration. Let's make this scientific. A phase transition is a shift from one state to another, solid to liquid, liquid to gas. Water doesn't fail to become steam just because it bubbles chaotically during boiling. That chaos is required. It's not disorder, it's reordering. You are the same. When you're in transformation, your inner world destabilizes. Beliefs that used to serve you collapse. Patterns that kept you safe unravel. Emotions once buried rise up. Nothing feels certain. And in that chaos, you question everything. You ask if you've gone backward. You fear you're regressing. You think you're failing the test. But here's the reality, you're not failing. You're undergoing a phase transition. You cannot measure a phase transition by the standards of stability, because the system is intentionally destabilizing in order to reorganize. If you try to judge a phase shift while you're inside it, you will always misread the data. Let's illustrate this further. A caterpillar doesn't sprout wings overnight. In the chrysalis, it completely breaks down. Its entire structure liquefies into chaos. It loses all form, all memory. It becomes biological plasma. Then, from that disorder, a new pattern emerges. The wings form, the body restabilizes, and what was once a crawling creature becomes capable of flight. Now imagine if the caterpillar judged its worth in the middle of that meltdown. It would say, "I've failed." But the melting isn't failure. It's the only way to shift form. Same with your transformation. When your world feels like it's falling apart. When clarity is gone. When you can't feel your direction or remember your power. You're not being punished. You're not backsliding. You're melting. The old identity is no longer sustainable. The system is increasing entropy, disordering the old structure so a higher-order configuration can emerge. And just like the boiling point of water, this isn't linear. Transformation accelerates, then stalls, collapses, then steadies. It loops and spirals and shakes your certainty loose. But that's the point. The self you were cannot access the frequency you're moving into. So it has to dissolve. Not improve. Not perfect. Dissolve. That means during a phase transition, your emotions may feel volatile. Your energy may crash. Your thoughts may spiral. And none of that means you're failing. It means your internal resonance is shedding incompatible harmonics. The frequency of your previous identity is collapsing, and new signal pathways are forming. This is not pathology. It's physics. Now, here's where most people misinterpret the process. They experience the destabilization and believe something's wrong. They run back to comfort. They reinstall old patterns. They scramble for certainty. But doing so aborts the transition. It restabilizes the old frequency prematurely, before the new configuration can take hold. This is why many people loop in cycles of change. They initiate the melt. It gets uncomfortable, and they retreat before the new signal stabilizes. Because they misread the pain as failure. But pain during transition isn't failure. It's friction between the collapsing pattern and the forming one. It's not a test. It's a release. Now let's connect this to the quantum field. When a phase transition is in motion, your personal field sends mixed signals. Old patterns flicker out. New patterns aren't stable yet. The field reflects this in flux. Unpredictable events, misalignments, emotional surges. And if you interpret this as a negative judgment, you reinforce incoherence. But if you recognize the signs of transition, you allow the disorder to complete its function. You stop forcing stability and let the new structure self-organize. Remember, no system evolves without disruption. Every quantum leap requires destabilization. So instead of asking, "Am I doing it right?" or "Why does this feel so chaotic?" ask this. What part of me is trying to hold onto the old form? What beliefs are refusing to melt? What structure is afraid to reorganize? Because the only thing blocking the new configuration is the insistence on clinging to the old. This is where resilience is redefined. Resilience isn't pushing through chaos. It's allowing chaos to complete the reconfiguration without reverting to control. It's standing inside disorder and trusting that a higher order is organizing. You can't force a phase transition, but you can support it. Here's how. Withdraw energy from the collapsing pattern. Don't feed it with worry or identity. Hold presence without interpretation. Don't narrate the chaos as failure. Stay available to new signal formation. Tune your awareness to emergent patterns, not decaying ones. And above all, stop looking for validation during the transition. You won't find it, because transformation doesn't provide comfort. Provides recalibration. So next time your world feels chaotic, your mind confused, your direction unclear, pause. Remind yourself, I'm not failing. I'm reconfiguring. This isn't breakdown. This is phase shift. You don't need to pass this. You need to allow it. Next, we will examine the mechanics of waveform collapse and why confusion, disorientation, and chaos are not signs of failure, but the exact preconditions for clarity and alignment within the quantum field. In the space before clarity, there is only chaos. Not because clarity is far away, but because the field of possibilities must destabilize before one outcome can solidify. This isn't just poetic, this is quantum reality. And it's happening in your life constantly, whether you realize it or not. To understand this, we need to discuss one of the most misunderstood yet crucial principles in the study of consciousness and transformation: wave function collapse. In quantum physics, A wave function is a mathematical expression describing all possible states a particle can exist in. Before a particle is measured or observed, it doesn't exist in any one state. It exists in all of them, a superposition. Every possible outcome is layered in a cloud of probability. Then something happens. An observation, a measurement, a defining moment of focus, and suddenly the wave collapses. From all that potential, one single outcome becomes real. One timeline stabilizes. One version becomes history. This is not limited to subatomic particles. It is the fundamental engine behind every decision you make, every emotional shift you undergo, every timeline you lock into. Every time you think you're confused, overwhelmed, or stuck, what's actually happening is this: you're surrounded by competing potentials. And the old outcome no longer holds authority. The waveform is destabilized, but the new reality hasn't been selected yet. That zone, the space where the signal hasn't collapsed, that's what most people call chaos. Let's slow this down. When you begin to question your job, your relationship, your identity, your mission, you're no longer resonating fully with the version of reality you've been living. Your signal is weakening its bond with the current outcome. The field starts to flutter. Your emotional system picks this up first. You feel uncertain, unanchored. You can't rely on your usual mental scaffolding. Your thoughts swirl. Patterns don't land. Strategies that once worked begin to fail. And right there, in that pocket of disorientation, is where the possibility for a new wave to collapse begins. But here's where most people sabotage the process. They interpret that in-between space as dysfunction. They believe they must not be clear enough, strong enough, healed enough, so they try to fix the feeling. They search for quick clarity. They default to old frameworks, or they freeze in indecision. But trying to force clarity in the superposition state prevents the right waveform from resolving. The field doesn't need urgency. It needs coherence. Let's reframe this entire experience. Chaos isn't confusion. It's the destabilized field seeking a new alignment. Clarity doesn't come from analyzing harder. It comes from resonance precision. Your job isn't to chase an answer. Your job is to stabilize the internal frequency that aligns with the outcome you want to become real. That's how you collapse the right wave. Here's how this plays out in your life. You feel drawn to a new opportunity, a new self-concept, a new timeline. But your field is still holding echoes of your past self. Fear, shame, doubt, logic loops. So instead of a clean jump, your system enters chaos. Both timelines exist in your field, the old one destabilizing, the new one not yet encoded. You're in between waveforms, and because you haven't fully anchored to either, nothing resolves. This is not a personal problem. This is field behavior. It's what the quantum realm calls decoherence. A period where multiple potential states interfere with each other before one becomes dominant. So how do you select the right one? Not with more thinking, not with more research, with signal integrity. You begin behaving, speaking, breathing, and choosing as if the new outcome is the only one that exists. Not in a performative way, in an energetic way. You become the frequency match for the new outcome before it has materialized. And the field responds by collapsing that wave. Not because you earned it, because you tuned to it. Now, let's expose why most people collapse the wrong wave. They sit in chaos and reach for certainty, not alignment. So they make decisions based on fear, scarcity, safety, and those signals have frequencies too. The field reads those signals and collapses the timeline that matches them. So even though they want to change, what materializes is more of the same, just packaged in a new disguise. And they wonder, why did this happen again? Answer, the wave that collapsed matched your dominant signal, not your conscious desire. You can't collapse the outcome you want while emitting the frequency of the outcome you fear. This is not about deserving. This is about congruence. The field is impersonal. It doesn't favor your wishes. It mirrors your waveform. So when you're in chaos, you have two choices. Wait in fear and default into your past pattern, or stabilize a new energetic signature and allow that signal to resolve the field. The second choice takes more awareness, more stillness, more courage, because you must choose alignment before there's any evidence it will work. But that's the essence of waveform collapse. It's not forced. It's not logical. It's not linear. It's field behavior responding to the fidelity of your signal. And the clearer your signal, the faster the wave collapses. So the next time you're in a swirl of indecision, emotional confusion, or cognitive fog, don't panic. Don't rush to fix it. Recognize, the old pattern is losing coherence. The field is waiting for a new alignment, and your job isn't to analyze the chaos. Your job is to embody the signal that will select the outcome you actually want to experience. Collapse that wave, not with willpower, with resonance. Next, we will unpack why your pain is not proof of your brokenness, but a signal that you are breaking symmetry, destabilizing the identity that once kept you safe but now must dissolve. The language of transformation is often laced with pain. People describe feeling shattered, fragmented, like something inside them is broken. They say, "I don't recognize myself anymore," or "Everything I used to rely on is falling apart," or worse, "I think I'm just too damaged." But here's the deeper truth behind that feeling. You're not broken. You're breaking symmetry. This shift in understanding isn't just psychological, it's architectural. It's rooted in how systems, including identity systems, evolve. Let's explain symmetry in this context. In physics, symmetry refers to balance, regularity, and predictability. A symmetrical system behaves in a way that preserves its structure. It's stable. It's repetitive. It doesn't easily evolve. That's how identity functions too. You create internal symmetry through consistent beliefs, patterns, emotional responses, and thought loops. These form your baseline reality. They become familiar, safe, predictable. But here's the paradox. The same symmetry that keeps you safe also keeps you stagnant. In order for a new identity to emerge, the symmetry must be disrupted. The pattern must destabilize. The old regularities must fracture. That fracture is not dysfunction. It's emergence. It's the precondition for accessing higher-order coherence. In nature, this is called spontaneous symmetry breaking, a process where a stable system collapses its current order so that a more complex, dynamic system can form. That's how galaxies form. That's how molecules evolve. That's how consciousness expands. And it's how you grow. When you feel like everything familiar is crumbling. When you no longer believe what you used to. When your reactions don't match your old self. You're not breaking down. You're breaking symmetry. The stable pattern that once defined you is no longer sustainable. Your inner system is making room for a new geometry. But here's what makes it feel like pain. Symmetry breaking creates dissonance. Conflicting signals emerge. Your nervous system gets confused. Your mind loses its map. Your emotional patterns surge in contradictory directions. And because we've been taught that stability equals health, we misread the dissonance as a defect. But dissonance isn't dysfunction. It's the turbulence of emerging order. You are not malfunctioning. You are being repatterned. Now let's look at this through an energetic lens. Your identity emits a vibrational blueprint. When that blueprint is symmetrical, meaning patterned and consistent, it holds a certain level of coherence. But that coherence might be tuned to trauma, lack, or past programming. In order to evolve into a new frequency band, that symmetrical identity must rupture. The energetic lattice has to loosen. The pattern must release. And in that release, chaos surges. You feel like you're falling apart, but you're actually making space for a new signal to stabilize. That space feels like pain not because you're broken, but because your nervous system is losing its familiar reference points. Symmetry breaking feels like dying, because the parts of you that were rooted in old coherence are no longer relevant. And your system grieves. But what comes next is the emergence of a more refined, dynamic coherence. That's the promise inside the pain. Let's make this practical. When you find yourself in a state of inner conflict, where you're no longer resonating with old patterns but you haven't stabilized new ones, pause. Acknowledge the symmetry is breaking. Ask yourself, what belief is losing authority right now? What pattern is no longer self-sustaining? What identity feels increasingly foreign to who I'm becoming? And instead of trying to rebuild the old symmetry, stay open to the new geometry forming beneath the collapse. This is not easy, because we crave stability, and the ego seeks symmetry at all costs. But true evolution requires instability. True change requires the death of the familiar. And true growth demands a break from the patterns that once defined your entire reality. You are not defective. You are disassembling the structures that limited your previous signal. You are breaking symmetry to form a higher order self. And that process is messy, beautiful, and precise. So the next time you feel like you're falling apart, pause the judgment. You are not in pieces. You are between patterns. And the identity emerging on the other side of this rupture is not a repaired version of the old. It's a completely new configuration. Next, we will explore the real implications of the observer effect, and how your focus isn't just influencing your life's direction, but determining which version of reality becomes real. Reality is not static. It doesn't exist independently, waiting to be discovered. It isn't laid out in advance, like a pre-written story. Instead, it's selected, resolved, not through effort, not through belief, but through observation. That statement might seem abstract until you realize its implications on every area of your life. Because the observer effect is not confined to laboratories. It's not a quirky trait of electrons or a concept trapped in the pages of quantum mechanics textbooks. It's alive in your perception. And the reality you stabilize at any given moment is a direct result of what you are consistently observing consciously or unconsciously. To understand how this truly works, let's revisit what the observer effect actually is. In quantum mechanics, particles don't exist in a definite state until they're observed. Before measurement, they reside in what's called a superposition, many states at once. The act of observation itself collapses that superposition into a single measurable reality. Here's the critical point. It's not the environment that defines the outcome. It's the observer's interaction with it. Now, this isn't metaphysics. This is empirically observed behavior in quantum fields. And the insight it offers into consciousness and human experience is profound. You are not a passive participant in reality. You are a resonant observer, and the focus of your consciousness is shaping which version of your life becomes real. Let's explore this practically. Say there are multiple versions of your potential future. One where you are fulfilled, impactful, healthy, clear, and another where you're exhausted, repeating loops and reacting from old trauma. Both of those timelines exist in your field. Both are real at the probabilistic level. The one that stabilizes isn't chosen by effort. It's chosen by which one you observe into form. Observation here doesn't mean glancing at something once. It means consistent, energetic attention. You can say you want success. But if your inner dialogue, emotional state, and nervous system are fixated on the possibility of failure, then the field reads your dominant observation as fear and resolves the matching timeline. This is not about thoughts creating things in some magical, wishful way. This is about field interaction. Every second, you're sending a signal. That signal includes your emotional tone, belief structures, subconscious expectations, and sensory focus. That signal is what your reality responds to. So what are you observing? What are you focusing on moment to moment? Are you scanning for danger, for reasons why things won't work, for memories that prove you'll always be stuck? Or are you tracking expansion, signals of alignment, the timeline of possibility? Because the field will amplify whatever you observe with consistency. Let's clarify a common misconception. People assume the observer effect is metaphorical, that it means you see what you believe, but it goes far deeper. You don't just interpret reality through observation. You activate specific probability streams based on your perceptual focus. That means you're not just creating mental interpretations. You're collapsing actual outcomes. This changes everything, because now your daily habits of attention become acts of timeline selection. This means when you indulge in worry, you're not just stressing, you're rehearsing a timeline into coherence. When you replay resentment or past betrayals, you're not just reliving memory, you're reinvoking the energetic pattern that collapsed those events to begin with. And when you place your attention on emergent qualities, creativity, trust, clarity, You're stabilizing those frequencies into physical form. Now let's go deeper. Observation doesn't only happen consciously. Much of your observational power is happening in your subconscious field. That means your traumas, unresolved pain, conditioned beliefs. All of them act as silent observers, and they keep collapsing timelines that reinforce their presence. So someone who experienced abandonment as a child may unconsciously observe all relationships through a lens of instability. Even if they consciously want deep love, their subconscious field is observing betrayal, fear, and absence. And the field responds not to the wish, but to the observer's resonance. Now, here's the empowering part. You don't have to fix your past to shift your field. You only have to change the observer. The self who's observing pain can be upgraded. The lens can be reconstructed. The energetic frequency of your gaze can be re-encoded. You can train your system to observe differently. That's the skill. That's the practice. Not manifestation techniques or spiritual rituals. Not chasing a better outcome, but refining the observer. Ask yourself, who is the self that keeps observing chaos? What timeline does that observer keep reinforcing? What new observer must emerge to collapse a different probability? Because at every moment, a new observer is available. A version of you who doesn't filter life through limitation. A version of you who doesn't fixate on being safe, validated, or in control. A version who can hold paradox. Who can feel discomfort without becoming it. Who can observe complexity without judging it. That version exists, right now. And the moment you begin observing from that version, not toward it, but from it, you initiate a new wave collapse. A new reality stabilizes. This isn't philosophy. This is architecture. Your gaze isn't passive. It's constructive. And that's what makes this principle so powerful. Because it liberates you from the illusion that life is happening to you. It reminds you that the most impactful transformation doesn't happen through effort. It happens through a shift in the structure of your observation. The clearer your gaze, the faster the field responds. So take your attention seriously. It's not a luxury. It's the control panel of your reality. And it's your responsibility to stabilize an observer who can hold the signal of the life you say you want, without collapsing back into the distortions of the one you're trying to transcend. Next, we will uncover the energetic architecture of transformation. Specifically, why deep change often feels exhausting or overwhelming, and how energy reallocation is required to build new timelines in the quantum field. There's a reason transformation feels draining. Not metaphorically, literally. Consumes energy. And that's not a flaw in the process. That's the process itself. Every significant change in your identity, every leap in consciousness, every shift in timeline, requires a complete redistribution of your energetic architecture. And most people have no idea how much of their energy is bound up in maintaining the version of themselves they say they want to evolve past. Let's make this clear. Your current identity runs on a budget. Not of money, of energetic allocation. That includes emotional loops, mental bandwidth, somatic tension, belief systems, neurological wiring, all of it. Every habit, reaction, attachment, and internal narrative costs energy. So when you begin a transformation process, you're not just changing ideas. You're attempting to redirect a fixed energy economy into new channels. And if that energy is still bound in old loops, rumination, fear cycles, identity maintenance, then the new signal can't stabilize. Because there's no surplus to fund it. Let's break that down. Say you want to move into a more empowered version of yourself. A timeline where you speak your truth, hold your boundaries, take bold action. But your system is still allocating 40% of its energy toward people-pleasing. Another 20% toward shame management. Another chunk toward overthinking, approval-seeking, and micromanaging your image. You say you want expansion. But your energy budget is already maxed out upholding the architecture of your previous self. So when the upgrade signal enters, when that new timeline begins to activate, you feel exhausted, confused, overwhelmed. Why? Because your energetic system doesn't have the available capacity to support the new identity. This isn't psychological resistance. This is resource scarcity at the field level. Transformation isn't just emotional. It's logistical. You must reallocate energy from outdated patterns in order to fund the stabilization of a new reality structure. Now let's take this a level deeper. Your body is an energy field. Your nervous system is a circuit board. And every thought, emotion, and behavior has an energetic cost. That means guilt isn't just uncomfortable, it's expensive. Overthinking isn't just annoying. It's draining your operational bandwidth. Holding back your truth? That's high-maintenance behavior. It takes a massive energetic load to filter your words, contort your expression, and scan for external reactions. When you live this way for years, you normalize energetic overextension. Then, when the impulse for change arises, your system says, "With what power?" And this is why transformation feels like burnout. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you've hit an energy wall. You're trying to build a new structure on top of a system that's already fully occupied. So what's the solution? Stop feeding the drain. Stop assuming you need more clarity, more certainty, more tools. What you need is energy availability. Here's how you begin. Audit your field. Not for productivity, but for allocation. Ask, where am I spending energy maintaining false safety? What emotional patterns do I keep fueling out of habit? What roles am I playing that no longer need my performance? Once you locate those drains, pull your power back. Don't negotiate with the pattern. Just stop feeding it. Because every loop you close creates surplus. And surplus is what your new timeline needs. Now, let's talk about energetic reallocation. This is not about pushing harder or doing more. It's about restructuring your field to support the version of you that aligns with your intended outcome. That means rewiring nervous system responses that reinforce hypervigilance, releasing obligation-driven behaviors that serve external validation, clearing out residual trauma loops that consume emotional bandwidth. And it also means investing energy strategically into embodiment practices that stabilize your signal, into stillness that restores your field, into creative impulses that align with your future self. You are rebudgeting your internal economy. And yes, it may feel destabilizing at first, because the parts of you that depended on overextension will panic. The structures that fed on your scattered focus will protest. But you are not here to manage dysfunction. You are here to fund coherence, to become someone who allocates energy in service of resonance, not performance. And once you do, you'll feel the fatigue lift, not all at once, but steadily, predictably, because your system is no longer maintaining obsolete scripts. It's building something new, and that something doesn't need your exhaustion. It needs your available voltage. So the next time you feel overwhelmed in your transformation, pause. Don't assume you're stuck. Don't assume you're weak. Ask, where is my energy still funding the old? And then begin pulling that power back. Not with guilt, but with clarity. Because your new reality isn't waiting for more effort. It's waiting for you to free up the current it needs to come alive. Next, we will unpack why patterns keep repeating, not because you're cursed or failing, but because your field is still resonating with them, and how fractal self-geometry reveals the map to true timeline shift. There's a moment that breaks almost everyone on the path of transformation. It's when you've done the work. You've shifted your mindset. You've adopted new habits. You've meditated, journaled, let go, affirmed, visualized, healed, and yet, the pattern repeats. You attract the same kind of partner. You hit the same ceiling. You spiral through the same self-sabotage loop. And you start to wonder, am I cursed? Am I broken beyond repair? Am I fated to keep reliving this? The answer is neither mystical nor moral. It's structural. You're not cursed. You're resonating with a fractal. Let's unpack this. A fractal is a repeating pattern that looks the same at every scale. It's a self-replicating structure. You zoom in and the micro resembles the macro. You zoom out and the macro still carries the same geometry. Fractals appear everywhere in nature. Trees, rivers, galaxies, DNA. And they appear in your consciousness. Your beliefs, behaviors, emotional reactions, and identity states are not random. They're fractalized. They repeat across time and context, not because you failed to change, but because your field still carries the blueprint of the pattern. This isn't punishment. This is precision. Let's go deeper. Every emotion you habitually experience sends a signal into the field. When you feel shame often, the shame signal organizes your perception. When you default to anxiety, your entire awareness grid is shaped by the frequency of uncertainty. Now multiply that over weeks, years, decades, and you're not just living through random events. You're walking inside an energetic fractal that stabilizes similar experiences across time. This is why people can change locations, jobs, relationships, and still end up in the same loop. Because the field doesn't respond to your surroundings. It responds to your signal architecture. So the pattern repeats. Not to hurt you, not to test you, but because your resonance is still tuned to that fractal geometry. Now here's the part most people miss. You don't shift fractals by thinking differently. You don't shift them by hoping or affirming or demanding. You shift them when your signal field becomes incoherent with the geometry of the old pattern. In other words, when you out-resonate it. Let's illustrate this. Say your fractal is rejection. That pattern might show up as being overlooked at work, or ghosted in relationships, or unrecognized for your efforts. Different situations, same structure. Why? Because your field is encoded with that pattern. Maybe from childhood, maybe from trauma, maybe from a lifetime of reinforcing beliefs that say, I'm not wanted. Now you try to change the story. You start saying, I'm worthy. You visualize being chosen. But emotionally, neurologically, somatically, you're still broadcasting, I expect rejection. And the field doesn't listen to your words. It listens to field consistency. So the same events recur. The geometry repeats. Not because you're failing, but because the fractal has not been out-resonated. Now here's the key insight. Every pattern in your field has a resonance threshold. When your signal begins to carry higher frequencies, truth, wholeness, coherence, the fractal starts to destabilize. Its grip weakens. It can't hold its structure inside a signal that contradicts it. And when your entire field becomes vibrationally incompatible with that pattern, it can no longer sustain itself. It dissolves. That's not magic. That's signal mechanics. So when you're stuck in a repeating loop, stop asking, why is this happening to me again? Ask instead, what pattern is this experience matching? What frequency in my field is still holding the geometry that welcomes this? What signal must I stabilize that makes this pattern impossible to sustain? Because when you shift your resonance to that level of clarity, the fractal cannot survive. It has nowhere to anchor, no compatible wavelength to feed from, and the repetition ends. Let's be clear, this process isn't fast. It's not instant. Fractal resonance doesn't break with willpower. It breaks through stability of signal over time. You must out-signal the distortion not once, but consistently. This is why people relapse into old patterns. They shift their energy for a day or two, but when pressure hits, they revert to the previous waveform, and the fractal gets reseated. The goal is not perfection. The goal is sustained incoherence with the old geometry. So if your life keeps mirroring the same issue, don't assume it's a test. Recognize, the field is holding a geometry that you still resonate with. Then become the pattern breaker, not by erasing the past, but by establishing a signal so new, so clean, so non-compatible with the old pattern, that the repetition has no echo left to loop. Your field is not punishing you. It's playing out the geometry it's fed. Shift the feed, and the fractal dissolves. Next, we will reveal how your identity isn't static, it's algorithmic, and why transformation isn't about healing a fixed self, but rewriting the recursive code that defines your perceptual and behavioral patterns. Identity feels solid. It feels like something you are, something core, unchangeable. True, but that's an illusion. Identity is not essence. It's architecture, and the architecture is algorithmic. Just like a software program, your identity is built on recursive loops. Inputs become outputs. Outputs feed new inputs. Over time, the pattern becomes self-reinforcing, stable, predictable, and eventually you forget it's even a program. You believe it's you, but you're not your programming. You're the one capable of editing the code. Let's explore how this works. Your identity is not a fixed trait. It's a system of responses. How you respond to praise. How you respond to rejection. How you respond to silence, to attention, to chaos, to calm. These responses aren't random. They're encoded, built through repetition. Every time you react to a situation in a specific way, emotionally, behaviorally, mentally, you reinforce the neural and energetic pathway that houses that reaction. Do this often enough and it becomes a loop, an algorithm. You feel discomfort, you avoid it, you feel momentary relief that reinforces avoidance as a default response. You express anger, you're punished, you suppress your truth, you associate silence with safety. You try something bold, you get rejected, you stay small, you equate visibility with threat. These are identity algorithms. And once they gain momentum, they start running without conscious input. Now here's where it gets deeper. Each algorithm emits a signal. And the signal that runs your identity doesn't just shape your behavior. It shapes your reality interface. Because the quantum field responds to algorithmic output, not personal worth. So if your identity algorithm is coded for hiding, you attract timelines where hiding feels safer than expansion. If your identity algorithm is coded for guilt, you manifest realities that validate guilt as your default emotional state. And no amount of conscious desire can override that algorithm until the code is rewritten. Let's get specific. Your algorithm is built on a few key building blocks: belief scripts, emotional reflexes, nervous system wiring, memory architecture, behavioral triggers. If you try to change your life without editing these blocks, you're just layering new decorations on an old operating system. That's why so many transformation attempts fail. People try to change the outcome without changing the source code that produces it. But the code runs deeper than mindset. It runs through somatic memory, subconscious associations, identity-level permissions. So how do you rewrite the code? Step 1. Locate the loop. Not the external problem. The internal algorithm that keeps producing it. Ask, what feeling do I automatically default to when this issue arises? What belief must be true in order for that feeling to make sense? What action do I consistently take as a result? What outcome keeps repeating? This is the identity loop. Step 2. Interrupt the loop, not with effort but with signal override. This is not about controlling behavior. It's about replacing the core pattern with a new algorithm that emits a non-compatible signal. Say your loop is, I speak, I'm misunderstood, I feel rejected, I stop speaking. You don't fix that by forcing yourself to speak louder. You shift it by reprogramming. I speak, I allow misunderstanding without collapse. I maintain internal safety, I signal coherence. This new sequence emits a different frequency. One that no longer attracts timelines of miscommunication and retreat. Step 3. Stabilize the new algorithm. This is where most people quit too soon. They run the new code once, maybe twice. But the old pattern has years of reinforcement. It will push back. Stabilization requires repetition under pressure. It means running the new identity script even when the old emotional reflex flares up. It means overriding the default impulse without bypassing it. You're not pretending. You're rerouting. And the more you repeat the new sequence, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, it runs on autopilot. That's when the field responds. Because the identity algorithm no longer emits the frequency of distortion. It emits coherence. Now here's the nuance most people miss. Rewriting your identity isn't about becoming someone else. It's about removing the code that isn't yours. Much of your programming was installed without your consent, by family systems, society, trauma, and early imprinting. Transformation doesn't mean fabricating a fake self. It means removing inherited loops that distort your signal so your authentic frequency can stabilize. So if you feel stuck, lost, inconsistent, don't assume you're broken. Assume the code is outdated. Then upgrade it. Not with willpower, not with identity statements, but with consistent override of the looped instructions that no longer serve your field. This is quantum-level change. Because when you rewrite the algorithm, you don't just feel different. You collapse different timelines. and the field stops responding to your past. It begins to mirror the new coherence of the observer you've become. Next, we will strip away the moral overlays placed on life's hardest moments and explore how what we've been taught to view as punishment is actually encoded initiation, designed to upgrade the vibrational structure of the self. Modern spiritual culture has failed in one critical area. It has mistaken initiations for punishment. That failure has created unnecessary suffering. It has made people believe their darkest moments are evidence of failure, disfavor, or karmic debt. It has caused those in the depths of collapse to internalize shame where there should be reverence. But here's the truth. The moment your life begins to rupture, you are not being punished. You are being initiated. And that distinction changes everything. Let's begin by dismantling the flawed interpretation. The prevailing cultural myth tells us, when chaos arrives, it's a reflection of your misalignment. When you're in pain, it's because you're out of favor with the universe. When the storm hits, you're being taught a lesson you failed to learn before. This myth is deeply embedded in collective psychology. It's in religion, where suffering is equated with sin. It's in spiritual bypassing, where trauma is framed as evidence of low vibration. It's in toxic self-help models that suggest if you're not thriving, you're doing something wrong. But this lens is backward. Not only does it misinterpret the purpose of your darkest hours, it also strips those moments of their sacred function. Because what we call hard times are not disciplinary. They are activations. Every major culture that understood the mechanics of human transformation, from Egyptian mystery schools to indigenous rites to Tibetan monastic systems, held one truth in common. There is a process through which the self must break in order to be reborn. This is not symbolic. It's structural. Let's go deeper. Initiation, in its truest sense, is a passageway between two energetic identities. It is the collapse of one configuration and the stabilization of another. It is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to disrupt the old frequency so completely that it cannot be reassembled. And that disruption, that's the exact moment most people interpret as punishment. But you're not being punished. You're undergoing an ancient sequence of signal upgrade. Let's make this real. When a part of your life disintegrates, when your job dissolves, your relationship falls apart, your sense of purpose disappears, that isn't life correcting you. It's life realigning you. The frequency you once stabilized has expired, cannot carry you into the next resonance layer. So the field initiates collapse, not to penalize you, but to eject you from the vibrational container of the previous self. This is the secret truth. The self that resists collapse is the self that prolongs it. Because initiation cannot be completed from inside the logic of the old identity. It requires surrender, not submission, but the release of resonance with what must die. That's where most people suffer, not from the collapse itself, but from the resistance to it. They interpret the disintegration as a sign that something is wrong. But in truth, the field is only following the architecture of transformation. Destabilization, dissolution, repatterning. This is why initiation is so misunderstood. Because in the in-between, the liminal space, you can't feel who you are anymore. Your certainty is gone. Your confidence evaporates. You can't trust your instincts. You feel like you're unraveling. And you are. But not into nothing. Into something new. Let's clarify the mechanics. Initiation always targets the ego structures that block coherence. It doesn't attack your worth. It dissolves the constructs that prevent your signal from becoming clear. If you've built your identity around being needed, initiation will bring abandonment to break that loop. If you've built your identity around success, initiation may bring failure to shatter the attachment to external validation. If you've built your identity around control, initiation will force surrender through chaos. Not to humiliate you, to extract the distortions in your field so that your next evolution is clean. So if you're inside a moment of collapse, if you're walking through fire, don't ask, why me? Ask, what distortion is this fire burning away? Because initiation is never random. It targets the exact pattern that must dissolve for your future timeline to become available. And here's what you must remember. The deeper the initiation, the greater the signal capacity on the other side. Your ability to hold impact, clarity, embodiment, it expands in direct proportion to your willingness to walk through the collapse with presence. This is why ancient traditions honored initiation with ritual, because they understood that when the self is falling apart, you don't need to be fixed. You need to be witnessed. You need to remember, the pain isn't a verdict. It's an alchemy. So let's strip away the guilt. If your relationship failed, maybe it wasn't your weakness. Maybe it was the system breaking to make space for truth. If your plans collapsed, maybe the identity that built them wasn't equipped to hold the life you're meant for. If you're lost, maybe it's because the map you were using belonged to a self that no longer exists. None of this is punishment. It's precision. Now here's the key. Initiation only becomes integration when you stop resisting the burn. That means you stop asking, when will this be over? And begin asking, what part of me is refusing to let go? It means you stop narrating your experience as failure and start honoring it as upgrade. And you do this without bypassing the pain. You feel it fully, but you stop interpreting it as a flaw in your path. Because when the signal of your identity is no longer matched to your surroundings, the field doesn't gently ask for change. It ejects the old pattern, and that ejection is sacred. So the next time life falls apart, don't reach for the shame story. Reach for initiation. Sit in the fire. Let it burn what cannot pass through the next threshold. And remember, you are not being judged. You are being reconfigured. Next, we will break down why transformation requires frequency precision, and how vague intentions create incoherent fields that the quantum architecture cannot stabilize into form. Reality is not listening to your words. It's listening to your frequency clarity. You can say you want abundance, love, impact, clarity, purpose. But if your internal field broadcasts ambiguity, uncertainty, or contradiction, your intention will not resolve. Your signal will not stabilize. Your outcome will not materialize. Because in the mechanics of energetic architecture, precision is the portal. Let's examine this. In a field governed by probability, infinite timelines are available. But they don't all activate at once. They require a specific energetic match, a precision resonance that stabilizes one timeline over others. That match doesn't happen through generalized desire. It happens through exact signal coherence. You cannot expect the quantum field to resolve a probability if your signal doesn't carry the frequency to support it. Let's translate that. When you say, I want success, the field doesn't respond to your phrasing. It reads your field data. Is your nervous system calibrated to hold visibility? Are your emotional loops compatible with responsibility? Does your subconscious associate success with betrayal, exposure, burnout? If those underlying patterns contradict the outcome you're requesting, the signal you send is distorted. And distortion equals delay. Not because you're being denied, because the system is waiting for precision. Let's look at how precision functions in wave mechanics. In quantum systems, coherence only occurs when waves align in frequency, phase, and amplitude. Even small deviations create destructive interference, canceling out the signal. In energetic terms, this means that vague intentions cancel themselves out. You want a loving relationship, but your signal carries avoidance, skepticism, and self-rejection. You want a business breakthrough, but your field holds self-doubt, fear of success, and divided loyalty to outdated roles. You want transformation, but your attention is scattered across 12 different timelines. That's not precision. That's noise. And the field doesn't resolve noise. It responds to clarity. Now, clarity isn't about scripting the perfect outcome. It's about cleaning the signal. That means emotional congruence. You feel what you're claiming to desire. Somatic alignment. Your body doesn't brace against the possibility. Narrative cohesion. Your thoughts support the outcome instead of hedging against it. When all those elements are synchronized, your field emits a single, clean tone. That tone selects the timeline. Let's be honest. Most people never stabilize clarity long enough to collapse a new outcome. They toggle between multiple intentions. They water down their desires to avoid disappointment. They claim empowerment but stay entangled in approval seeking. This creates interference patterns in the field. Outcomes flicker, then vanish. Synchronicities appear, then stall. Momentum builds, then dissolves. Not because of failure, because of signal fragmentation. You cannot stabilize a reality you're not internally committed to. Let's pause here. Commitment doesn't mean obsessing. It doesn't mean trying harder. It means consistency of frequency. It means holding the signal long enough for the quantum field to register your pattern as the dominant probability. Think of it like this. The quantum field is like a radio receiver. It doesn't decide what to play. It amplifies whatever signal is strongest, clearest, and most consistent. Your life is what's being played back. So when your station flickers between frequencies, the field doesn't punish you, it just can't stabilize a coherent output. To change this, you must refine your transmission. You stop broadcasting what's acceptable. You stop signaling what's safe. You begin sending the exact vibrational architecture of the outcome you are ready to embody. Not hope for. Embody. That means feeling it, speaking it, trusting it, aligning with it before evidence appears. Because coherence precedes manifestation. Now let's dismantle one more myth. You don't have to be perfect to be precise. Precision doesn't mean zero doubt. It means dominant signal clarity. You can still feel fear, but if your overall resonance carries conviction, the field responds to that. You can still experience contrast, but if your nervous system is calibrated to truth, the timeline stabilizes anyway. The problem is not doubt. The problem is division. So the goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. It's to stop feeding multiple timelines simultaneously. Because when you do, none of them stabilize. So ask yourself, is the outcome I want supported by my behavior? Is the version of me required to hold this outcome present in how I speak, move, think? Is my field sending a focused invitation or a fragmented signal? And once you locate the distortion, resolve it. Not with force, with signal alignment. Because precision isn't about control. It's about resonance integrity. You don't have to work harder to change your life. You have to become clearer. And when you do, the field doesn't hesitate. It responds with exactness. Because outcomes aren't attracted by desire. They're resolved by frequency. Next, we will conclude by bringing together everything you've learned, revealing how to maintain stability while navigating timeline volatility, and how to anchor into your chosen self without collapsing back into distortion. Reality isn't static. It's not a single track you're moving along. It's a multidimensional matrix of overlapping probability streams. A dynamic lattice of outcomes, all existing simultaneously, waiting for your consciousness to stabilize one of them into form. When people speak about the path, they often visualize it as linear, forward or backward, success or failure, progress or regression. But the truth is, you're not on a line. You're on a field of timelines, each activated by your signal, each dissolving or intensifying depending on the quality of your resonance. That's why transformation isn't a staircase. It's more like surfing. You catch a wave. You ride it. Sometimes you crash. Sometimes you flow. And most of the time, the wave you're on is determined by your frequency, not your effort. This chapter is about learning to surf the field, to navigate the instability that arises during change, not by gripping tighter, but by mastering balance inside the movement. Let's begin with a truth many avoid. Even when you've selected a new identity, even when you've collapsed a new probability, the old ones still linger. They don't disappear immediately. Their echo remains in your field, and they will attempt to pull you back. Not because you're failing, but because you haven't fully anchored your resonance yet. Here's what you need to know. Timeline slippage is normal. It doesn't mean you've regressed. It means the gravitational pull of your past configurations is still active. And unless you understand how to stabilize your signal while the field flexes around you, you'll interpret that slippage as failure. But you're not failing. You're surfing. Let's break this down. Each timeline carries a specific energetic pattern. The events, relationships, thoughts, and emotions you experience on that timeline are all organized by that pattern. When you shift your identity, when you reconfigure your emotional baseline, your nervous system regulation, your thought scaffolding, you emit a new signal. That signal magnetizes a new timeline into coherence. Events change. Opportunities emerge. People enter or exit. Synchronicity accelerates. But that coherence is fragile in the early stages. Why? Because the stabilizing frequency is still being tested, not by the universe, but by your own field. Every part of you that still carries the echo of the old identity will want to test the structure. It wants to know, is this real? Is it safe? Is it sustainable? And those microtests show up as fear spikes, emotional backlash, external chaos, unexpected reversals. This is the wave testing your balance. And the key to surfing is not to avoid turbulence. It's to maintain center while it rises. Let's get practical. Say you've stabilized a new level of confidence. You're showing up more boldly, setting boundaries, owning your truth. Then, out of nowhere, a trigger hits. Someone challenges you. A door closes. Doubt creeps in. Your nervous system reacts. You panic. You question everything. You say, "Why is this happening again?" Here's why. You shifted timelines, but you haven't fully anchored yet. Your job isn't to panic. It's to recenter into the new signal, even when the field throws turbulence. Because anchoring a timeline requires energetic consistency during volatility. It's not about perfection. It's about refusing to collapse back into the logic of the old version of yourself. Here's a mantra to remember. The trigger is not the threat. The reversion is. You will be triggered. You will be shaken. But the outcome is determined by which version of you stabilizes in response. So when the old timeline surges, when the fear pattern, shame loop, or avoidance reflex tries to reclaim dominance, you hold steady. You say, "I see this. I've rehearsed this. But I no longer identify with it." And in that moment, you override the magnetism of the old configuration. That's how timeline surfing works. Not by bypassing the noise, but by refusing to source your identity from it. Now let's talk about field layering. You are never experiencing only one timeline. Multiple timelines coexist in your perceptual bandwidth. Depending on your state of being, different layers become dominant. You might wake up feeling clear and grounded. Your highest trajectory is active. But by noon, after some stress or emotional dysregulation, you drop into a lower timeline. Same physical location, different frequency, different field behavior. Recognizing this shift is critical, because you'll assume reality has changed. But reality didn't shift. Your observer shifted, and your job isn't to shame the shift. It's to redirect your field back to the timeline you choose to live from. That means becoming hyper-aware of your signal drift. You ask, am I perceiving from my chosen identity? Are my thoughts congruent with the version of me I claim to be? Is my emotional state aligning with the timeline I intend to stabilize? If the answer is no, pause. Reset your system, not by forcing positivity, by anchoring into frequency disciplines that restore coherence. Breathwork to reset the nervous system, stillness to reorient the mind, language precision to recall your chosen self, embodiment rituals that reconnect you with your core field. These are not rituals for comfort. They are instruments of timeline stabilization. Now let's clarify a myth. Timeline surfing is not about constantly upgrading. There's a trap in always chasing the next level. Real surfing includes holding a wave, staying with the version of reality you've selected long enough for it to mature. Many people shift timelines prematurely, not because they're evolving, but because they can't sit still. They confuse activation with embodiment. But surfing isn't about speed. It's about stability inside motion. You anchor, you integrate, you allow the new field to become normalized. Then, once that timeline is no longer challenging to maintain, a new doorway opens, and you initiate another jump. But only if your current signal has fully metabolized the previous shift. Otherwise, you're stacking upgrades on instability. So here's the practice. Stop collapsing every time your emotional weather changes. Stop assuming every trigger means you've regressed. Stop reaching for new timelines to avoid stabilizing the one you're in. Instead, master signal anchoring. That means becoming so consistent in your resonance that turbulence no longer pulls you out of your center. You can feel the storm. You can witness the distortion. But you remain calibrated to the self you've chosen to be. And over time, the field stops testing your alignment because your coherence becomes default. That's when the wave carries you effortlessly, because you're no longer surfing from willpower. You're surfing from stabilized identity. So to end this journey, remember this: you were never being tested. You were being tuned. You were never being punished. You were being initiated. You were never failing. You were recalibrating. And every collapse, every distortion, every repeated pattern wasn't a verdict on your worth. It was a call to refine your signal, reclaim your field, and reselect your reality. You are not at the mercy of fate. You are the selector of timelines. You are the engineer of coherence. You are the observer, and the waveform collapses where you stand. Hold your center, ride your wave, and stay stable. While everything changes,